dive in.
dive into.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe
they-
people will come in.
And the audio would be recorded.
Yeah. The light's on, so I think so.
So it's switched on already? Okay, cool.
There's a red light.
I think you timed everything out. Well, I am from just over the bridge. We're in Jersey City. We've only been unschooling about a year and a half. Our kids are still small. I help to run a mom's group of about 600 parents where I completely advocate for homeschooling and unschooling. And then I have another much smaller group of about 35 parents, which is specifically for homeschoolers and unschoolers of color, to have a space to come and talk about things that you don't really get to talk about necessarily in the public, a more public setting or open setting. And this is my husband Neil, who's co-paneling, and that's us.
I'm Zakia, and I'm from Johannesburg, South Africa, and also always unschooling. So my eldest is 18 and my youngest is 9, and this has been our paradigm since day one. And my interest in diversity really, so I do support for unschooling parents in South Africa in general. But I'm also interested in the potential for unschooling as a tool for decolonizing our minds. So South Africa also has we're 20 years into democracy, but there's huge issues around identities and racism. So the schooling system still doesn't allow black girls to have their hair naturally. They need to chemically straighten it and tighten it and still stay in that paradigm. And unschooling has this potential because we're not going with one fixed set of knowledge system. So we're opening up. There's diversity in the knowledge systems. And so that potential for looking at all knowledge, open knowledge, indigenous knowledge, different cultures, the potential to say anything is important and of value, not only the subset that has been defined as math and history and geography, etc. That gives us the power to then unpack all these myths and biases that we have about what should be, how should we be, whether a family has to be a man and a woman and of the same color, and we can unpack all those and get within this where when we're saying we're accepting whoever you are, then we're accepting all knowledge systems, how you identify as gender. So I really find, for me, I find unschooling a really exciting tool in which we can explore how to decolonize ourselves from the one Western Judeo-Christian Islamic paradigm of this is how you are. That's
cool. I don't know if my reason for being here is as interesting as you, but I guess that we're doing unschooling in a bit of a different way. We're unschoolers, but we are, I guess, more rigid than others in the sense that there's a lot of things that we expect of the kids when it comes to treating others well, and the way you behave socially. Those are important to us, and so we also have to, in our family, we say we have to respect each other's needs, the parents' needs as much as the kids' needs. So, there's little examples I can give later on where, if we were radical unschoolers, that wouldn't happen in the house. We talked about that a little bit, where the kids have to do certain things just because it works really well for us and in turn it works for them. I guess that we also are a little bit different because I'm French, so we have 2 languages, and that's a big reason why we homeschool. Obviously the kids are bilingual, and that's really important to us. different, is our belief system is different. Our beliefs and our values are different than a lot of people around us. We're very much against anything that is forced on us, and so in the homeschooling community around us, there's a lot of people who still, even though they say they want total freedom, really are dependent on others to kind of tell them what is the right thing to do. We're very much against that. So that's why I feel a little bit like an outcast, because we're not able to kind of find our tribe around where we live.
Can you repeat a little bit what you said just a minute?
For me,
Yes.
which part?
Like why you're from?
We are from New Jersey. I guess for us, we have a lot of layers of diversity within our household. I mean, obviously the most apparent between the two of us, but we're also, I think, mixed faith. My husband's, well, you can speak for yourself, but he's more of an atheist, whereas I'm pagan. Our kids are equally exposed because I am a pansexual woman, so we have those conversations.
Can I ask
What does that mean? It means that for me, in terms of relationships, it goes beyond the binary. So I have relationships with and I'm attracted to people, not just man and woman or other, but all of the various stages in between. So I personally don't believe that gender or sexuality is in a binary system.
So like the
full fluid gauntlet of.
So basically, you're attracted to people for people.
Absolutely.
Who gives a shit what else
Right.
is attached?
Yeah.
So does that also come into, sorry for getting personal, but I'm subscribed to I Have Nothing Secret, so I kind of forget that when I'm asking questions, that sometimes people are a little bit more uncomfortable, so feel free to not answer, but does that then translate to like more of like a polygamous side as well, or not so much?
Do you want not much so much polygamy, because I feel like polygamy tends to entail like wider relationships, like long-term relationships, and that's not where we are. We're more sexually involved with people, but not the emotional extended relationship of like,
so
I'm going to bring you into the
relationship
fold
in
of
a
the family.
sense.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's that for us. Is that it? We've got a lot of layers. A lot of layers of diverse or multifunctional relationships happening within our little household unit.
And you say 2 kids?
We have 2 kids. They're fairly young, 4 and 6, and we've been homeschooling for about 3 years now, and just unschooling for the last year and a half.
Cool.
And we're both, I think, he's formerly Catholic. I was raised as a
I'm
Catholic.
I'm very atheist now.
Raised as a Catholic Muslim, so we've got a lot going on. Does that answer your question? Or you?
Thank you. Well, I'm also from a very diverse family. We are French. I'm French. My husband is Mexican. We have lived in Spain for 7 years. Now we live in Mexico, in Guadalajara. And we have only 1 2-year-old kid. So we have discovered unschooling 1 year ago, and we are in the deschooling process of our minds still with some fears on some things, but we are willing to continue as much as possible in this way. So we chose this city because I like the diversity there is. There is a community of kids that don't go to school, and they are either homeschooling or unschooling and all in between, and they are from all religions. There are a lot of Christians and what they call Catholic and what they call Christians, and atheists, and now there is a debate about the marriage, and they are people strongly in their Facebook page, strongly against the new laws that would allow more flexibility in marriage, and those that are totally like in favor of the family. And so it's very, very diverse, but like we just go together and mix, and kids play together. We are just here for learning new things, activities, so I like it very much, this diversity. Yeah, because I don't want my kid to be just with the same prototypes.
Yeah.
So that's what I think.
And also different nationalities? Or they're
Yes.
all Mexican?
They are mostly Mexicans in this community. They are in our neighborhood. There are many nationalities, but not necessarily homeschooling. They are more school. But there is a park where we also gather every day. There are people gathering there, and mostly kids go to school, and they are from all nationalities. So that's another way also to meet other kind of kids. And so I like it.
Do you find that homeschooling in general is growing in Mexico?
Yes, it's very free there, so it's easier than in France and in Spain, because the state just like doesn't interfere, and people do what they want, and because anyway the state doesn't have the money to pay school for everybody, so it's like, well, I can't say anything. But so for the moment it's like this, and we want to protect that. There was a debate on, is it good if we want to make the screening of being and becoming there and make it more loud, or do we have to stay a little bit discreet so we don't have like what happens in other countries, more regulations? So for the moment, yeah. What was exactly your question?
I just wanted to know if there was a larger community, if it was growing in general in the area, because I know that here, like say for instance, Puerto Rico has a very active, thriving homeschooling community. Homeschooling, I don't know how much about unschooling, but homeschooling in general, under the umbrella. But here, there are not many people that I personally have come across from a Latino Hispanic background who are homeschooling even. So we're just curious if that was something that was growing in Mexico.
Yes, no, we are. Well, there is a small community that is a bit secret, a secret group, a secret Facebook group.
Okay.
So it's not going very fast, but still with the people
But little by little.
friends and coming. Yes. There is this debate whether we should like make noise or not.
What do you think?
I was more about I like to that everybody has the opportunity to know about this, or I'm now creating a Facebook group just for the screening of Being and Becoming, because that was the movie that really changed my mind about unschooling, that really opened me like, wow, that's what I want to do, because it's really positively seen in the screen. I don't know if you have seen the movie and what you think about it. Would be interested to know if you have seen it, what you think about it, but I have this idea that it gives us a lot of trust, seeing this movie, trust on the children, and I would like everybody to have more trust, even if the kids go to school, but more trust in the way that children can learn. So I created a Facebook group with other few people who were like a bit alone, but were wanting also to show the movie to Mexico. So now we are from 5, 6, and more many cities coming in this Facebook group that with people that know a little bit of this movie and would like to show, to see it or to watch it. And then, so maybe this will lead to many more people knowing. Hopefully it will work to make more people know about it, because many people I think would like to try it, but they don't, like me 1 year ago, they don't feel they have the capacity or they have the passions to do it. But when you think it's not so much about being passionate, but just like living your life joyfully, and it's much easier. So in this movie you see it like this. And with this debate, we have also had an idea in Guadalajara, like thinking about where to show the movie, in which place to have the screening organized. We had this will to create perhaps something bigger, like a big event with all people, not only in school and homeschooling, because this movie is more about in general, child trust, etc. So it can be also alternative schools and all the movement of natural birth and natural and breastfeeding and all these things. So we were talking with Dani about creating perhaps in the next year an event in Guadalajara with more people around those ideas. Also to make it bigger, yes, and more diverse. Not only the homeschooling Christian families, but also a bit more like open to every idea.
So it's not a debate. We know what that's the right thing to do to get the word out, right? Because otherwise, you're debating.
Some of them say that's dangerous.
That's the thing. That's a fear of of oppression. You're worried that if you say what you think is right, and you're going to be oppressed. So
that's true. That when you have been in Spain and in France and you have been and you know that in Germany you can go to prison. There is some fear about if the government begins to. Of course, they would like to regulate it because they cannot just. Like, it's not in their nature to trust so much families. I don't know, because some families can like a lot, in many countries can be very violent with their kids, so they have, or do something, I don't know, the state would like...
The fear of more intervention and regulation.
Yeah, they will not think about prevention.
I just want to jump into, you didn't get a chance to introduce yourself.
I'm Amanda. I'm going to my third year of unschooling. I am a single mom. I've been a single mom for 10, almost 11 something odd years. I've dated, I've just never had a parenting partner, so it's been myself. I was a teen mom. I got pregnant at 15, so I've been kind of becoming an adult while my son also becomes a teen and an adult, so we're kind of growing together. We're also world schoolers, so we don't have a home. We travel full time. We've been doing that. We're going on about 16 months of no home. And then we also are quite radical in our unschooling, and there's a couple of things that might be debatable in that, but like the large side of it, we're radical unschooling, we're very technological. I'm a completely open technology use for myself as well as him. I don't care if he spends 12 hours a day on his computer or TV or whatever, it's great. There's stuff going on, and we really embrace that side of things. So yeah, it's...
Do you want to introduce yourself and what brought you to this conversation?
Well, I'm really interested in diversity. I think it's a greater conversation we all need to have. Our stories are very similar, other than the teen mom here. So, but radical unschoolers, homeless, travelers, world schoolers, single mom, that stuff. Although, yeah, I was old when I had my kid. But I mostly lived in Latin America for the last 8 years. Or actually, for the last 8 years, I have lived. Not mostly, I have. So we are the foreigners. We are the outcasts. We're in somebody else's land. And so the cultural sensitivity and respect and being okay with the differences and really learning from that, has been a beautiful kind of dance that I've been learning. Right. So, I think cultural diversity is a beautiful thing. We learn from one another, and I think it needs to be respected. I don't think we need to be a homogenized planet. I think we can hold on to our differences and still shine, among the reflection of one another in our differences. I think it's an interesting conversation that needs to be had in the context of education and unschooling and home education.
My name is Neil. I'm Felicia's husband.
I guess he's pegging himself to mine.
Okay. I thought we might be accused of discrimination against males or something.
how would you describe it in this diverse? Would you describe it with all your kids in this area of diversity?
Our kids we have one who's just kind of hanging out and oblivious to everything, our 4-year-old who's just being 4. And we have a 6-year-old who's a little bit of an anomaly. She's well beyond her years and very involved in conversations about culture and history, and very much relates to being a Black person. And so this is one of the things that brought us to this conversation in particular, is because she notices when we go places, where are all the brown people and why aren't they here? So that's part of what led us to this conversation, is where do we have an obligation to have those conversations to bring more people, not necessarily drag them into unschooling or homeschooling, but to have those conversations and make them more aware and create safe spaces for them to ask the questions. Because as an African American identified woman, some of the issues I can recognize going in, or conversations that I would need to have about unschooling, are different from the questions that other people may have. And there's another cultural layer, of a few centuries of just in America, of things that need to be addressed in a different way. So that's why it's important for me to have these conversations and to be here, because people, we're all unschooled, we're working on our biases, we're working on our stuff, but for the most part, people bring their biases with them along the way. And so even when you come to these conferences, sometimes there are tensions or issues that people end up having that make it uncomfortable, and then they go back and have those conversations with other brown and Black people. And that kind of helps to scare people away from unschooling. And let's be honest, unschooling is already kind of a lot for people to process, right? So those things kind of build up layers of very real, tangible concern for people who are othered. But I very much believe that unschooling and homeschooling and alternative education is very much a tool of liberation. And if you can get past those questions and get past the stuff, that it's very much a tool of decolonization of just the mind and the being and everything, but getting there is difficult. And there are conversations that we need to have as African Americans, which I'm sure are different from conversations that you need to have as a South African and you need to have in Mexico, you need to have being French. There are very specific things that need to be discussed and addressed in a way as it relates to unschooling that are difficult. So for us, and for a lot of the people we know with Black children, I can't realistically give my kids free reign to media or television or Netflix. And that is one of the things for a lot of unschoolers in general, that's like a no-brainer. But I can't for their cognitive, their development, for their ability, for their well-being. Because a lot of those shows go over the heads of most people. It's not a factor for them, but they're not represented in those shows. And when they are represented in those shows, they're represented negatively, and they're internalizing that. And then there's all of these things that come after that I can't sit and watch with them all day. So those are concerns,
You can be the whole day with them.
Right. So there are conversations that need to be had on an ongoing basis that I just can't sit my kids in front of the TV if that's what they want to do and say go for it, because all of these other things have to be addressed along the way. And I know that that's a concern that people of color have. So just things like that.
I think most people don't want to watch TV, don't want their kids to watch TV. It's like, for so many, probably also different reasons. When I sit in front of the TV, we don't have cable anymore, so that's very helpful. But there's just too many messages that are subliminal and wrong. So we focus on real life, and that's one of the things that is a little bit hard for us to deal with other unschoolers around us, because a lot of the homeschoolers will be like very, very strict on TV, but the unschoolers that we meet, they will really not monitor at all what their kids watch, and that's something that we do. That's what I was saying, when we bring a lot of rules, like, our kids can't. They always have to ask us what they watch before they watch it, because we need to make sure that there's just so much stuff.
And I think that's true. But I would love to be that free. And my kids would love to be that free. And I would have no problem if what you say is true. There are some other things that are concerning about television in general. But I would love to be able to, this is what you want to do for a few hours, go for it.
Yeah, but you have to see who is responsible for broadcasting the images.
Right.
So if you
And that's a societal issue. And the theory is that if more people were unschooled and balanced and accepting of themselves and accepting of other people, that wouldn't be an issue. But getting there is going to take a while. That's the theory. So then the question becomes, how do we get there, right? So for me, that looks like hosting conversations about unschooling and homeschooling in general for the general public, but then creating separate spaces, whether online or in person, for those same conversations with people of color to address those specific issues, or hosting those conversations for people who are in one-income families or low-income families to say, what can we do to make this a possibility for you?
Can you give us a few examples of what are some really specific issues that you encounter, and things that are, that need to be addressed, like you said?
So I don't think that, so a lot of those issues are just societal issues in general, especially being here in America. I don't think I'm going to get any answers in this group, because it's a much wider thing. But just on the topic of some things that come up for unschoolers, like the TV and the media, I would love to let my kids, dive in wholeheartedly. But the fact of the matter is that the images that look like them on those things are highly detrimental to them. That's an issue. I would love to let my kids, or even the kids in my family when they're with me, who are undeniably darker skinned than my particular children, right? Half the year my children fit in like everybody else. We get a little sun in the whole time. So there are those issues, but I would love to have the kids with me just be free. And when we're at a park or we're by ourselves, it's fine. But if my brother or my nephew want to play guns or whatever, you can't be in front of the window, because now you're perceived as a threat to half the people that walk by. Like, that's a very real issue for us. You can't be in the park shooting guns or having sword fights if you want, because a lot of kids do, right? They don't have that freedom. They are perceived as a very real danger to them, even though they're not actually a danger, but the perception. So they can't have that freedom. And I do give it to them, but each time I have to go through the process within myself. Is it worth it to let them have this bit of freedom to do this? Is the potential outcome worth it? And a lot of unschoolers don't have to factor those things in, right? And so when we talk about unschooling as a tool of liberation, that's the struggle that I have. Do I let them all the time, or get into the place where I let them all the time just be and let go of that fear? But is it going to be worth it when, because it's a when, something happens?
You mean if they play with guns?
Not even guns. If they're pretending to be guns, if they're playing with pretend people see them as a threat. Those children, those brown children, are doing something dangerous and suspicious, and this is an issue. This is a very real issue for us.
Yeah. You've experienced that?
Yeah, we have. And we do, our kids, I have a brother who's 11. And he's a big boy. And we know firsthand when people see him, they don't see 11, because this is the other issue that brown and black children have. They are perceived as much older than they are. So letting them just play outdoors is dangerous for us to a certain extent. And that's a hard thing,
as soon as you enter the, you know, just like the public, which there's no people like us, you know, then you have to adapt all the time. It's
Right. And half the time we just, you know, let it go, like we're holding it in. We're just gonna let them be free because we want them to be free. We want them to demand their humanity and just be themselves.
what happens
But
when you do
act
that.
their
So,
laws. Usually somebody will say something.
like what?
I'll give you an example of being in a conference last year. We are a mixed race family. My children can pass as they're white presenting most of the time. There are families here through adoption or any other combination who have children that look different from them. I'll have people come up to me at a conference, unschooling conference, where the kids are running and playing. These brown children over here are behaving inappropriately. Can you rein them in? Can you do whatever?
What?
From other unschoolers, right? Because, and this is where I say everybody brings their stuff into the situation along the path of working on it. These children are doing something different. These children, these brown-skinned children, are playing exactly the way all of the other children here are playing. And these children aren't even mine. They just happen to be brown children.
They say those brown children. That's what they say.
They will come up to me and point out your children, these two children,
Because
are
they
jumping
assume.
or they're doing some
Yeah.
silly
So
thing
they assume
that all of the
they're
kids
yours.
are doing. But these kids are yours. This is an inappropriate activity for them, despite the fact that all of these other children are doing the exact same thing.
It's bias, yes.
So,
And it's like, and then I'm put in a position to say, and I don't mind being in that position because I walk very much into conflict. I'm not afraid of that. But then I have to say, these children are doing exactly what those children are doing. In fact, they're playing together, but these children don't even belong to me.
And this person who came and told, assuming that they were your children because of what they look like, which I think would be fine.
Which,
you know.
yeah, on its own
But-
is fine.
but that
But the fact
person
that these
didn't go-
children, this behavior from these children is unacceptable.
But that person
But
didn't
even in this
seek
context,
out
as
other
an
parents.
unschooling context,
She specifically did not seek out other parents. She
Right.
seeked you out.
which is fine.
and-
Like, it's understandable as a black person that the black children would belong to me. That's fine. But the real issue is these children aren't doing anything different from any of the other children. But somehow that is perceived as different. And that's a real concern for people when we talk about unschooling, because we talk about unschooling as being a little bit hands-off or a lot hands-off. And that's a concern for when I talk to other parents of color. That's a concern that they have because we've been conditioned for decades and centuries in this country that we have to demand full obedience from children, from our children, as a way to protect them. And things like that kind of highlight why people are afraid to move into that sphere. So that's one of the issues. That's a big one. And it's an issue why I know a handful of unschoolers of color who won't come to conferences anymore because situations like that make them very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So there's, people of color, unschoolers, need a space to be able to have these discussions. But unschoolers, because how do you bring that sensitivity out to the general?
So this is one of my questions to pose to, well, I guess the five of us. What do we do with that? How do we, is that our responsibility as a group, as unschoolers as a group, to bring these conversations to the table? Because a lot of people will say, and I've had this conversation here over the last couple of days too, well, just living as an unschooler should be impetus enough. And it's not.
You
Or
don't
the
think
processes.
that, you don't think that just by you being comfortable with how you are with your kids and how your kids are with you, you don't think that kind of like radiates enough to influence others? Or do you think that you need to really go ahead and, I mean, you probably have a different situation than I do, so I understand if you feel the need to speak out.
Well, I think it's a colonialization issue.
Oh, absolutely. All over the
Yeah,
place.
and these discussions need to be had.
Right.
I mean, I'm sitting here absolutely appalled at myself for not considering your perspective beforehand. Like, I'm obviously considering it
Right.
now, but it would have never occurred to me.
Right.
And that I'm appalled at myself for not having that self-awareness, because I haven't had this conversation. And to me, this is probably the best way to create this sort of opening.
Right.
And I'm going to talk to you after this because I got to do a show with you because, oh my God, these conversations need to be had.
And I want to be clear about something really quickly. Like, I say of color because this is a question that comes up, and I think there's not enough people here to really, so I haven't addressed it. I say of color because the group that I have is open to everybody of color, depending on where they are. Like, I can't speak specifically to all of their issues because I can only speak as an African American. But we leave it open because everybody has a different take on a very similar situation. So when I say of color, I mean a variety of colors.
What would you like to do? What would you like to, how would you like to have these conversations? What do you have ideas on?
So I have them all the time. For me, it's, and I know a few other people here have the conversations as well, the wider unschooling conversation. And I feel like for me, part of my thing is to come in and to make sure at all of those things that I attend, that I bring up these aspects, these questions, so that people who maybe have these concerns but are uncomfortable voicing them or because a lot of times they're not addressed. Being there, being vocal about it, and saying, you can come have this conversation with me. That's my thing. But I also feel like my job is to, so the other thing about this community in general is, we don't like to think it is, but it's kind of pricey to be an unschooled. I mean, you can be at home and be unschooled, but to find community is kind of pricey, right? So then we have to talk about income disparity and the socioeconomic diversity and how to bring them in. And so I kind of, for me, I join the two because there's a lot of overlap. So I make myself available. And when I have these talks, specifically when I have talks with people of color, but when I have these talks, for me, a big part of that is saying, if you want to make this happen, I'll do whatever I can to help you. You need somebody to watch your kid for a couple hours while you work because you have to work, I'll do that. I'll get an extra car seat or booster seat and we'll make it work. And I've created a tribe of people around me who do the same thing. So maybe I'm busy that day, but so-and-so will watch your kids so that you can work and you can do whatever you need to do. But the ideal for me is to have a safe space. Now that's a safe space, whether it be a community center or a building or a room, where we can offer childcare to people who have to work or have to do something else. But also, within the confines of this space, all of the children are able to just be free and do whatever they want within the context of this particular space.
And show an example of what it can be.
Right, now the reality of making that happen,
That's a lot of work.
it's a lot of work, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of, so that's the ideal for
but
me.
It's like everything, I see all of these issues, and I'm like, the reason why it's expensive is because we have to pay the price for being free, like, okay, you want to be free, well, you're going to pay a fine, aka school taxes, and it's just not, it's always related to, how.
And I think I think that Anne has made it pretty clear, both on the website and in passing, that if people were struggling to get here, if it was financially difficult, talk to me, I'll work with you. Mm-hmm. But a lot of conferences don't have or don't do that, and so that is a deterrent to people who would probably come, even if they were coming just to listen and get the full grasp of what it can be. So even that is a little bit problematic. And you understand why it costs to rent the space,
Are there conferences that deal just specifically with diversity or unschooling for people of color?
Not that I've seen. I think there was one in Georgia, I think like 5 years ago or something. And I don't know if it didn't go well, if it didn't build enough traction. I don't know how many people actually showed up, but that's the only thing that I could find that was dealing with that specifically.
Other question I have is the question of responsibility. So for me as an unschooling community, and like, you know, like I'm brown, but I fit in like in many spaces.
Right.
Right? And so the responsibility is, if you as a community says you value diversity, you value individuality, you value how you show up, how people show up, then as a community, I think we have the responsibility, and it's difficult, but we have that responsibility to understand all those challenges of different identities, be it sexual identity, color, class, and we need to understand how does unschooling work for you, what are the challenges, and that your challenges are also our challenges because we are a community.
Right.
You know, like we all need to take that kind of responsibility to say,
Right, but in this culture, there's a lot more segregation. Well, no, I'm talking to somebody from South Africa. I mean, but segregation is not, it's not an outwardly thing. It's a subconscious cultural bias that we are born into. And again, for me, not even understanding their perspective, it's because I haven't had that perspective. I'm compassionate and empathetic now that I'm here, but we need to have those conversations. You're right. But my question about what you're talking about, and it also expands on the immunity aspect, is how do you become more embracing of a community as a whole without segregating yourself, right? Because you're talking about supporting yourself within the Black community and helping other families that are having the same challenges and biases. But how do you then expand yourself to be this part of the community as you're talking about as a whole? Because you do have very distinct differences in terms of the concerns in regards to unschooling and homeschooling.
Well, I think part of it is that whether we acknowledge it or not, or whether we're aware of it or not, and I'm going to continue saying of color for the purpose of this conversation, but whether we acknowledge it or not, people of color, right, already exist in two worlds. Those things are implicit for them. So it's not about necessarily translating from the support space to the wider space. It's about having that wider space automatically be more accepting, and then we wouldn't need this support space anymore, right? So we need it from the outside in versus from the inside out, because we're already operating in two worlds already, most of us, right?
So what does that look like?
For me, it looks like having this space for people to talk about, you know, the microaggressions or the things that I experienced at a conference or at a homeschool meeting or at a play. I had some crazy things go down at homeschool play dates, let me just be clear, which is how that space came to be in the first place. Having that safe space to get that stuff off their chest and free themselves so that they can be present, so that when we're in the wider space, I'm not taking the drama, the resentment, and the issues from those issues to people who've had nothing to do with it. I can be fully in the wider space and still have the support and the need.
I mean, one of the things I think about is, like in South Africa, where the gatherings happen are in traditionally white spaces or in traditionally upper or middle class, you know, spaces. And then there's one homeschooling family that lives in a completely African area in Cosmo City. And they always host things, pool parties, barbecues, etc. And it's only the same 5 families that always go to, so people don't want to go into black spaces. Like we say, come out of your space and we'll create an inclusive space for you, etc. But it needs to be a two-way thing. You need to be willing to go into other spaces as well. And so when they host something, it's the same 5 families that arrive there. I don't know, we haven't managed to bring in we haven't managed to bring in other families to come in. I mean, we have a great time, but
I think
just logistically, it's difficult.
Yeah, and I think part of where we are in New Jersey specifically, there is the insulation, the socioeconomic insulation is a big part of that. So what I found specifically in this scenario is that we're more willing to say, we're going to have this event at this park today, come to that, and we're going to have this here, and you're welcome to come to that. And people get very much, well, when you have it in my neighborhood, 2 blocks from me, maybe I'll come check it out. But I'm not going to go down the street over there, because I literally had this conversation with people. Because that 3rd block is just too far from me and a little bit unsavory. And we're talking about 2 parks on the same street. And so that kind of factors into it a lot too, is that people have to be willing to both to have the want to have those interactions and be willing to put in the extra effort, right? So that's a big part of that. So we're talking a little bit about diversity and feeling supported within the unschooling community, and how, for me personally, what that looks like is creating safe spaces for unschoolers and homeschoolers of color to kind of let off steam and then be able to equally participate in the wider unschooling community and what some of those difficulties are for people.
In California, I just came from California.
Which part? Sorry.
Near LA, 40 minutes north of LA, Chatsworth.
I lived downtown for years.
Westlake Village is what I particularly lived in. And I loved my brown group. I loved it. I felt safe. You have all this unconscious bias out there. A very well-meaning non-brown, non-black people. But you have it, and the entitlement, and the privilege. And they look at me and like, you're homeschooled? Why would you homeschool? Why would you homeschool? So, it was a very isolated, silo-ish feeling. And I'm very young in my unschooling journey, so I love the segregation. I love it. I'm done trying to prove or fight, and so I loved being segregated. I loved it. I guess I'm gonna have to grow out of that eventually, but
Or not.
we'll see. I know, right? I have to find my silo here, but it is lonely because out there you do feel you're doing this alone. Are there other black people or other brown people doing this? And it's in California anyway. There's a big Hispanic, Latino, Mexican population, and they're all tied into the system.
Yes.
Or immigration, there's lots of legal issues for them, and so they can't even begin to think of unschooling. So for them and there's a big religious component for them also. So following status quo is big. So recruitment was tough. But you only need a tribe, a small tribe, and where are you now? We just moved to Keyport, New Jersey, which is like south of Amboy, I think. But I'm originally from New York. He's from Brooklyn, I'm from Queens, and we grew up in New York, but now we're back.
Sorry, I have a friend in Keyport, and she said there's a very strong homeschooling community.
Homeschooling or unschooling?
Well, she doesn't homeschool. She wants to, but I can find out more.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry, off topic.
I also find that within, it's tricky, now that you say that, I hear it in my head. It's tricky because there seems to be an extra level of stigma, and I believe that this goes back to the cultural issues that we touched on a little bit about being conditioned to believe your children have to be obedient for your safety. But I find that a lot of unschoolers, of color specifically, identify even in groups of unschoolers as homeschoolers because they feel a different level of stigma. So there may be actual unschoolers in that group who are just hiding undercover the umbrella of homeschooling until you get it.
Get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah.
Yeah, because unschooling in and of
Right.
itself is a leap. So.
Can you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Shonda, and my son Noble, he stayed in the city today. And we live on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I'm originally from Chicago, the Midwest. And I think when I first walked in, you were talking about people of color having to live in two different worlds. I did that. I was a classical ballet dancer, which, many people say, oh, so you were on Broadway? No, I was in a classical ballet company. So there's that. And so my son is biracial. My husband was white. He passed away actually in January, so we got that extra layer of things going on. But before he passed, we had discussed doing this, and so I'm going forward. Yeah, here I am. The Upper West Side is interesting. I lived in Brooklyn for many years, which I loved. So easy to make friends. It seems like a very ideal place to do something like unschooling. Brooklyn does to me. But we're on the Upper West Side, and it's very corporate. And we've joined a few groups that meet in the park, but they're all white. Have I met any brown unschoolers? No. And that's New York City. So it's important for me, for Noble to see people that look like him. And so I'm going to continue. We're very close to Harlem. There has to be. There must be. I have to do more work. And I think that's part of our responsibility is to be the wizards that create these situations that are ideal for our children. So that's the process. But he's loving it. He's, I don't know if any of you saw him. He's very fun and outgoing, and he's loving just being able to be himself.
How old's your son?
He's 4.
It seems to me that everybody's searching for community regardless of where you're sitting. And I just, on so many other levels in terms of my life, it affirms how important it is. And I'm somebody who doesn't have a home. I'm by choice homeless. So we travel and we don't have the privilege of having community around us. We have to make it online. We have to make it when we come to conferences and when we come to meetups. But for 8 years, we've had no home base or home community. So I feel and hear and understand, but from a totally different perspective.
How old are your kids?
I have one son who's now 17.
Wow.
So we started traveling when he was 10. That's how we grew up. So coming to these spaces, which is something we've been doing, we fly back. It's very special. So I look forward to all of looks forward to all the teens for his.
Has helped a lot that homeschool brown women were much tougher with their kids because they just couldn't they knew that the society would be tougher also with them and not so much do you feel that too?
I don't so much, no, but I can understand where that would come from. I personally don't feel that.
Well, it's a little bit of what we talked to before about the conditioning, right? The fear-based conditioning, which a lot of the fear that we talk about here at the conferences, or at all the conferences, I feel like is like hypothetical fear, but this is a very much more real and tangible fear for this particular group of community. So I understand where it comes from, and it's very hard to move away from that because you realize that the fear is much more tangible than some of the other things that we discuss. I also find that it's hard. I mean, where we are, like I said, my goal is trying to make this an opportunity for everybody, and what I do what I can as far as making that a reality for anybody who wants to try or to make it work. But part of, for me, is the understanding that this is somewhat a privilege. It is. It's a big privilege. So I'm very much attuned and involved still in trying to work within the dynamic, the paradigm of the public school system where we are. And you see things from a slightly different view because there are lots of people there who have, overwhelming circumstances that make it much more difficult, like you were saying, very, very much more difficult than me offering childcare. That's not going to be enough, right? But then you also run into people who feel like the social justice aspect of it. My parents worked for integration. We're here now and you're going to leave? Yeah. Like, what are you doing? We fought for this. This is where you need to be. And so that adds a whole other stress, I think, for people when they're considering it.
Is it stress or is it an opportunity to have conversation? Because I understand what you're saying.
I think it depends on the person. Okay. So for me, I'm not a conflict-driven person. You might have a different take on that. I'm not a conflict-driven person, but I walk willingly. Like, I'll have the hard discussions with you. But a lot of people can't, or they aren't, and that has a lot to do with their individual stuff. So it does become a stress. Like, I know, I was thinking about it this morning. We went upstairs from the dance party last night, and my 4-year-old cut all her hair off. And I'm just thinking to myself, do I need to, my family is overly attached to one another. Do I just send a picture on the family group me and let them know now? Because I'm going to be having this discussion every day until her hair grows back. Like, every day until her hair goes back. And I can take that, but I know, like, my sister could never. She would rather just drop down somewhere than to have to deal with that from my family for more than an hour. So it depends on the personality. So for some people, it really is a stress. Whereas I'm just like, oh, here we go. Here we go.
So I've noticed this in sort of an opposite perspective because, like I said, we live in Latin America. That's where our foundation has been. And, we're homeless and we have very little money. But this is all choice, right? So there's a privilege to making that choice because I could easily go back to the States and get a job and work. And although I wouldn't have time with my son, so, there's that. But I could. So there's a difference between a lot of people that we come across, that are farmers, that have dirt floors, that, grew up with these dreams of the United States, right, and what that stands for. When we talk to them about unschooling, it's appalling. And we're having a conversation in Spanish, and, the question is, you don't send your son to school, he doesn't do work, and he will talk very articulately about how beautiful it is to learn from life. And there's a slight maybe shift in the perception from the people that were saying, but then it goes back to the original programming, which is we're in a developing nation in order to get better, and be like you guys, we
Right.
need education. And that is the lie. That is the colonialization.
Right, that's
that we're
absolutely a
talking
remnant of colonization, absolutely, because that was the way, right? That's the way that we're going to humanize these people. We're going to go into their cultures and their countries, and we're going to educate them to our history and the way we want them to be in order to make them human. And so it gets embedded into the culture and the psyche of people for generations.
Indeed.
Right.
And so what we've learned to do is to walk step lightly and just be the joyful people that we are and inspired by our presence, because I'm not going to shift a whole culture's
Right.
perception. That is a baseline belief. And if we can show them that there is, without this sort of pushing up against, here it is, that's what we do, that kind of thing.
And it's not your space to.
It's not my space.
No, yeah.
Because
But
there were
I
these
want-
people coming to tell, these foreign people coming to say, this is how you must live and learn. And then there's this other foreign person coming to say, this is how you live and learn.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's not your space, yeah.
Right, and it's exhausting to try it. I mean, on the flip side of that, it's exhausting for the wide, going back to the conversation of the wider group, it is equally as exhausting for me to constantly, because Lucy lives where we live in Jersey City, I am constantly in front of a group of people talking, but it's exhausting to be trying to bring people along all the time, and sometimes it's at their request, the wider group come talk to us about diversity and what can we do, but it's still exhausting. So I just try and be the beacon, live the way we live, and also to make myself available for people that want to have those conversations. And I've gotten very good at spotting people in the crowd in those wider groups who may have those questions and issues that they don't want to ask in the wider group. But and always part of those dialogues, there's the pushback first, but you can see the click happening. So just to make myself available. And sometimes I just sit before it's my turn to talk so I can spot those people. And then sometimes it just takes, a little eye contact, and they'll come talk to you after. And then you can kind of give your spiel. And sometimes they come with you, sometimes they don't.
Well, I think your energy and your approach, you are making a change.
Well, it seems like a lot of us are in this New York, New Jersey area. I would love to get contact information. I'm not really a Facebook person. Maybe I should change that. I don't know. But I can email. So before we close out, I would love to
Oh, absolutely.
connect.
Yes.